Come on. There we go.
Excellent. All right. Welcome, folks. See, we've got quite a few people already logging in. That's great. We're going to get started in the next couple of moments here. Just give everybody a chance to log in today. This is part 2 of our fruit tree series. This is going to be talking to you about care and maintenance. And just so that everybody knows, we are recording these series of webinars, and we will be posting them up on our YouTube channel at the conclusion of the series. So once we get through part 3, we'll get them all together and put together a playlist and put them on YouTube so that you can take a peek at them later if there was something that you missed or you want to review more of the information. We will have that available for you. And as you go throughout the presentation today, do remember to use the Q&A function to ask questions. Kathy Oliver is going to be monitoring in the background, and she can answer some of those questions as we go, and the rest of them she'll save for John to answer when he has a moment to do so. Let's see, where are we at? 24 folks. I'm going to give it one more minute, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, we're a couple minutes after 11, so we're going to go ahead and get started today. My name is Alyssa Vinson, and I'm the residential horticulture agent here at the Manatee County Extension Office. And I just want to take a quick second at the beginning to introduce today's presentation. Again, this is our second in the fruit tree series, Care and Maintenance. You're going to be hearing from John Dawson. He's one of our elite Master Gardener volunteers, an expert on fruit trees, and you're going to be able to get a lot of really good information from John. If you're unfamiliar with our program, which a quick glance through the participant list kind of lets me think a lot of you are pretty familiar with Extension. I saw a lot of familiar names there. So welcome back to those of you who are joining us for a second time or a third time or the 100th time. And if anybody's out there hasn't been to one of our programs before, welcome. We're happy to have you. UF-IFAS Extension is a function of the University of Florida. We are part of the land grant university system. Our sister university here in Florida is FAMU, and we work closely with the researchers at the university to bring you the best horticultural information that is available. And so that's what we're going to do today. And I hope you all have a wonderful time. And John, feel free to go ahead and get us started.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about care and maintenance of fruit trees. The first thing you want to do is keep in mind that the University of Florida has a wonderful website called Fruitscapes. This should be your primary source of reference in the care and maintenance of your trees. To get the Fruitscapes, you want to search Fruitscapes ;IFAS, Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. If you just put in Fruitscapes, you'll wind up with a nursery in Pine Island, Florida. So make sure you put the ;IFAS when you do your first search. The website is set up so that you get information on all the various fruit crops you can grow here in the state of Florida. You have your temperate fruit crops for your northern counties, subtropical fruit crops for us folks in the center of the state, and the tropical fruit crops for the folks down south. Now, here in the central part of the state, we can grow several temperate fruits and we can grow several tropical fruits. The folks up north can grow quite a few temperate fruits and some subtropicals. And the folks down south can grow subtropical and tropical fruits as well. Now, the website has many videos that you can actually see. And it's very interesting in that you can get some insight on the care of your tree. Okay, as an example, you can go on and see various types of fruit in the subtropical areas. And here we have carambola or star fruit. I'm just using this as an example. Last week we were talking about planting fruit trees. There's also a nice video on learning how to plant your fruit tree as well. So when you go to the publication, link on carambola, you'll get a fact sheet that comes up. And this is the Fruitscapes video area by Dr. Crane. He's the professor of tropical fruit crops at the University of Florida. And he's one of many authors who have developed these publications. You can actually download these in a PDF form as well and keep them as reference. So if you purchase a carambola tree and you want to learn how to grow it properly, download the PDF and make yourself a copy of this. The publications themselves provide a tremendous amount of information. Your scientific name, Avaroa carambola. Okay, this is what you need when you go purchase the tree. You want to make sure that this is what you're getting. It's in the same family as those Oxydaleaceae, which is your Belimbis oxalis. Oxalis is a weed that grows in your yard. It has been known to provide oxalase. And at the bottom, you'll see a very important warning. It basically says if you're going to grow this tree and eat the fruit, you should have permission from your doctor if you suffer from any kind of kidney disease. Because of the oxalic acid that's contained in the fruit, you could have a very bad reaction. There have been people who have actually died. So keep that in mind. Here's what you want to look at. This is the management routine for carambola. It's on the back end of the publication sheet. It's usually around table 3. It basically tells you month by month what to do as far as maintenance is concerned. So you'll see that the first thing you look at is applying fertilizer, when to apply fertilizer. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But you'll see where it says micronutrient applications, that's also a fertilizer application, along with iron. You'll see about watering, pest management, and pruning as well. So here's a carambola tree. This is one that's in a container. It's a little small carambola. So if you have only a small area in which you can actually grow fruit, say as a lanai or even a patio area, or a porch on a condominium, you can actually grow various fruit in small containers. The carambola tree, when it reaches full maturity, can produce over 300 pounds of fruit every year. That's a tremendous amount of fruit. Most of it goes to waste, falls on the ground, and then you're going to have problems with collecting the fruit on the ground before various critters get to it. So again, container planting has a lot of assets and pluses to it. It takes up less space. You can move it in and out whenever there's a big freeze or a major storm coming up. Very easy to water and fertilize. Uses much less fertilizer than if you would plant it in the ground. A lot easier to weed, and it keeps the tree to a manageable size. Now, every 2 to 3 years, you want to check your tree in that container and make sure that the roots haven't taken over and are now tightly bound in the container itself. So you want to try to remove the tree as carefully as possible from that particular pot that you have it in. Try to remove most or all of the soil from the roots as much as you can. It sometimes helps if you hose it off with clean water. And then you want to repot or place in a new pot. When you do so, if you want to use the same pot, make sure you clean it very well and sanitize it with a bleach solution. It's usually 1 part bleach to like 9 parts water. If you notice when you take the plant out of the pot that there is a white ring around the pot, that means you've been providing too much fertilizer to that plant in that small pot. It basically accumulates over the time and it causes problems because fertilizer is basically salts, and a lot of fruit trees do not do well in a salty environment. So you want to fill the pot with clean soil, and you want to plant it at the same depth as when you took it out of the pot, which means that somewhere along the line, you're going to have to probably cut off those roots that are circling in the pot itself and straighten them out as much as possible. Now, they do have new pots now that are called air pruning pots that you can grow your plant in that. When the roots actually get to the holes in the side of the pot, they stop growing. They basically hit the air, and then they basically say, this isn't soil, I need to turn around. So those pots are available, and you can take those pots and put them in a more ornamental pot if you so desire. So you've planted your tree, you've waited at least 30 days or more, and now it's time to provide that tree with fertilizer. Now, the first mistake most people make is they think that fertilizer is basically food for the tree or the plant. It's basically a added nutritional capability. So think of fertilizers as vitamins for your plant. And if you look on a multivitamin label and then look at your fertilizer bag, you'll notice that we both share a lot of common mineral requirements. Plants do not use the vitamins, but they do need minerals as well as we do. Now, the reason we take vitamins is because there's not enough nutritional value in the foods we eat. So we supplement our diet with vitamins, and fertilizer is the same thing. We provide nutrients that may not be available in your soil. Now, will your tree do well without fertilizer? Well, if you look on the side of the road, nobody's fertilizing those trees. So nature does take care of a lot of trees. Now, will you get the fruit that you're looking for, or will the tree be as healthy as you can possibly make it? Probably not. So that's why the publications from the University of Florida provides a list of various types of nutritional needs as far as fertilizer is concerned. And you'll see that right here. So in the top 3 areas of your table, this happens to be for mangoes. You'll notice that it basically says you want to fertilize from March through August. Now, what you have to understand is some counties like ours in Manatee, we have a fertilizer ordinance that goes into place from the 1st of June to the end of September. And that basically means that you should not be applying nitrogen type fertilizers to your trees during that period. For those of you who do not have ordinance problems, follow directions from the University of Florida. So a lot of times you'll have to make allowances for applying the fertilizers when you can. So in this case, I would apply fertilizers March, May, and then again in October, if you live in those areas where we have an ordinance. Also, here in Manatee County, we basically sit on top of phosphate. So we basically tell our customers, if they can, find fertilizers that do not have phosphate as part of their contents, where the bag that says NPK, the P would equal 0. And the reason we don't want to apply additional phosphate is because the plants will basically take what phosphate they need from the soil itself and will not use that additional phosphate. It gets leached through the soil and winds up in our estuaries, which gets into the various streams and the bays and causes a blooming of algae and various other problems. So we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. It says apply 2 to 4 nutritional sprays. Now, your fertilizer is basically going to be in a granular formula. Okay, so you will apply that around the base of the tree. The nutritional sprays, however, provide the various types of minerals that are basically not found in a normal bag of fertilizer, but are required and used by the plant through the leaves. So you're going to spray both the bottom and the top of the leaves of your tree with these nutritional sprays. Okay. Iron is usually applied to soils that have a high pH, a low pH, or if you live down south in calcareous soils, the trees basically are provided a iron soil drench. Okay, when we do apply fertilizer, we want to provide that fertilizer where it counts, where the tree will be using it. If you look at a tree, it has structural roots which go down and are much bigger, and they provide the stabilization for the tree to keep it from being blown down in winds and things like that. In Florida, because we have a very sandy soil, most of those roots will go out further than up north where they go deeper. From those roots as well, we have what we call feeder roots. All right, feeder roots are basically on the outer edges of the tree under the soil, anywhere from 9 to 12 inches down. If you look at the tree and you think about what happens after a rain, the water drips down. And at the furthest edges of the canopy, the water will drip down. This is what we call the drip line, okay? When we apply the granular fertilizer around the bottom of the tree, we want to apply it in a uniform amount, 1 foot in to 1 foot outside of that drip line, all around the tree. Now, sometimes you'll see in the stores fertilizer spikes, or what they call tree spikes. We don't recommend using those, basically because it has a very small area of coverage. Most people do not apply enough spikes to go around to provide coverage for the entire 360 degrees that the tree's feeder roots will be coming out. So if you buy a pack and it only has 4, it's only going to provide a very small area, and the feeder roots will basically start growing toward that area. Now, if you go back a year later and apply those same spikes, but in a different area, now the feeder roots that were in that original area don't have your fertilizer, and now you're applying spikes in areas where there are no feeder roots. So I avoid using those as much as possible. Okay, pruning, to prune or not to prune. Okay, if you look on the right, you'll see Norris Ledesma. She's the curator of fruit trees in Miami at Fairchild Gardens. Now on the left is her family in her native Colombia, basically climbing in a mango tree. So these are both mangoes. The one on the left is probably about 35 or 40 feet tall. The one on the right is less than 4 feet, which can be also grown in a container. So when we prune, we basically look at fruit trees to maintain their height. Fruit trees in Florida can be kept anywhere from 10 to 12 feet in normal operations. If you're going to plant it in a container, or if you want to maintain a very small growth habit, you will have to do a little bit more pruning. When we prune, the first thing we want to do is take care of any dead or broken branches that may have come out because of storms or what have you. Suckers, those are the basic parts of the tree that come out. They're also sometimes called water sprouts. They'll basically go straight up. And you can see that as a diagram on A there. Those do not provide any fruit. Normally, if it's a citrus plant, those will be the ones that do not have any thorns on them. They're basically taking minerals and water away from your tree, and you want to provide more of that for producing fruit. Also, if a tree is grafted, which most fruit trees will be when sold, you want to make sure that nothing grows below that graft junction, or what we call the knuckle. That's on the lower part of the tree. If you see any of those, you need to take them out as quickly as possible. I recommend, if you can, breaking them off instead of cutting them off, which basically keeps it from regrowing back. What that is the original grafted root section trying to grow back. And if you let it grow, it'll actually turn into whatever your root stock was originally. If it's citrus, it's probably a sour orange. If it's a mango, it's basically a what they call a turpentine mango. So you want to make sure all that's cleared. Any branches that are basically growing toward the ground, you want to get rid of those. Any branches that are basically rubbing at each other, those you also want to get rid of. And you want to keep your tree down to a reasonable height. On your left, you'll see a mango plantation planted the old way. These trees are anywhere from 24 to 30 feet tall. You can see that they're basically right next to each other as far as width is concerned. There's not a lot of air movement. Mangoes grow where the sun shines, so basically on the outside of the canopy. In order to pick the mangoes on the left, you basically have to have a large pole, and that will allow you to get to the fruit. The problem with the growth on the left is you have to provide a lot of fertilizer. You have to provide a lot of chemical treatments to keep fungus and things away from the tree. And you also have to provide a lot more water. So now on the right, this is the new way that mangoes are grown, basically 10 feet apart. They're kept at a height about 10 feet. They're pruned such that the middle section is taken out. And you have a situation like this where you're looking at it from the top. The tree basically now looks like a donut, all right? So you can see the gentleman down there. It's much easier to maintain as far as providing any chemicals you might need for disease and pest management. It's a lot easier to pick the fruit, and you won't have any damaged fruit. In fact, the smaller trees actually provide more fruit than growing the old way, okay? So it's less cost to you, and it makes it a lot easier to maintain it in your landscape. If you've ever bought mangoes in the store and you find a mushy spot on the mango, that's where the mango fell out of the tree and hit the ground, okay? So here's some tips we have, all right? Pests and diseases, you want to know your tree, keeping records, okay? So if in May, your mango tree shows signs of anthracnose, black spots on the fruit and throughout the leaves, you'll want to make sure that, okay, now we know that somewhere in May, this tree was having problems. So you'll know that next year at this time, just prior to seeing the problems, you can actually go out and spray the tree and keep the fungus problems in check. You want to scout often for any kind of damage or insects that may appear on the tree, especially when the tree is providing new growth, okay? You'll want to learn how to do integrated pest management. That's basically looking at the least lethal method of ridding your tree of any kind of insects, pests. You'll want to use your fruitscapes sheets to tell you what you can and should use and for proper identification of insects. It will tell you the most common insect problems you'll find and disease problems as well. And if you can't, or you want to get more information, you can go online and search for common problems of mango, semicolon IFAS, or use any of the educational sites, .edu, or you can use our services at the extension office. So if you can, at least twice a week, at least, but most people can't actually do that all the time, but at least go out and check your trees. Use a magnifying glass to look for smaller insects. Most of your insects that are going to be causing problems sometimes are not as easy to see with the naked eye. And you want to look at both the top and undersides of the leaves. Insects are pretty much shy and they don't want to be discovered by predators. So a lot of times they'll be hiding under the leaves. So you'll want to turn the leaves upside down and take a look. Look at the inside of leaf junctions and flower buds. That's where a lot of aphids and other bugs like to hang out. Look also at the soil surface and the base of the plant. Okay. See what might be burrowing in the soil or coming out of the soil. So we're going to look in changes of leaf color, any kind of damaged leaves or pests that you'll actually be able to see. But if you notice at the bottom right, those little yellow guys are aphids. Those are quite common throughout the area and they attack a lot of different types of fruit. What you also see is the more recognizable ladybugs, okay? These are the good guys and they eat lots and lots of aphids, but just be aware that ladybugs have larvae as well, which basically don't look anything like the actual adult ladybug, but they actually consume a lot of aphids as well. So what you want to make sure is before you start spraying for anything whatsoever, make sure you don't have a lot of good guys there helping out because they'll basically take care of the problem naturally, okay? So again, going back to our management routine, you'll see that for our carambola, it basically says for insect control, you'll want to monitor for scale and other insects throughout the year, and especially stink bugs when the fruit becomes present on the tree. Okay. Also, you want to look for root rot fungi and things like that. So to get more information, you can actually go online and check those out. And here's what I have as far as what I put out as a fruit tree health assessment. If you look at your tree and you're trying to figure out what may be the problem, the first thing you want to look at with your naked eye and your little magnifying glass is any kind of pest damage. You'll want to look at the leaves themselves. If it's a very young tree, you'll want to look at the bark itself. And on the right side, you'll look at two different photos. The first one is animal damage, okay? This happens to be from deer, basically chewing at the bark of this young fruit tree. The way you can tell it's a deer, it'll look like somebody has scraped it from the bottom up. Deer only have teeth on the bottom of their jaw, so it'll look like somebody wedged it up. At the bottom, what you'll see is damage from a weed eater or a lawnmower bumping into it. So this is what we call mechanical damage, all right? So when you plant your fruit tree, you want to make sure you mulch out to an area that will cover a good portion of the tree to keep basically people from running the lawnmower close to your trunk or keeping the weed eaters away as well. So when people call in and they ask, why is my fruit tree not fruiting? What I ask is, was it planted correctly? Did you plant it too deep? If it was grafted, is the graft at least 2 inches above the soil line? Was it fertilized correctly? Did you apply fertilizer at the time of planting? Or did you wait the 30-day period and then then fertilized? And were you using the correct amount of fertilizer and the right type of fertilizer? Did you plant it in soil where the water doesn't drain very well? Is water been sitting on it for more than an hour after a big heavy rainstorm? Did you do a soil pH check to make sure that your fruit tree will grow well in the soil pH that you have available for it? Do you see any signs of disease? Basically, you'll notice that in the actual leaf colors uh, or leaf drops and things like that. We'll get to that in a second. Was it the right age for fruiting? Most trees, when sold, are still young. And sometimes after you plant, you may have to wait 3 to 5 years after a tree that was grafted, sometimes 5 to 8 years from a tree that was air pruned, or 8 to 12 years if it was planted from seed. Was it watered properly? Did you use the right type of water? Is there salt in your water? Are the roots okay? If it's a very, very young tree and it has planted less than a year, you might want to dig it up and check your roots to see whether or not it was root bound, or if you have circling roots. And was it overly pruned? When you do prune a tree, you want to make sure that you don't take off more than 25% of the tree at any time throughout the year. Was it getting enough light? Most fruit trees require full sunlight. So maybe you planted a tree at a time when there was no shade, but now that the sun has changed in the sky, it's now being shadowed by a larger tree nearby. And is it getting enough sex? Is it a fruit tree that requires cross-pollination from other trees? If you only planted a single tree and it happens to be a male, it will never fruit. So critters and pests. Fruit basically attract pests, okay? They like fruit as well as we do. So birds, rats, and squirrels, raccoons are probably going to be your number one suspects. Hungry neighbors, that's always a problem. Usually what you want to do is provide enough fruit even for your neighbors and invite them over to be friendly. I had a Tahitian lime tree that would put out like 300 limes every year. There's no way I could possibly use that many. So I told the neighbors to come in and get whatever they needed. Insect pests, they'll always be around. Fungal diseases and things like that. So a lot of HOAs basically won't allow fruit trees to be planted in the landscape because they will draw these various types of critters that come in when the fruit becomes ripe. And a lot of times when you grow your fruit, they'll get to it a lot faster than you will. So what I normally tell folks is if you're growing like mangoes or any kind of fruit that hangs, you can protect the fruit by taking some old window screen, wrapping it around your fruit, and then stapling it together. And then basically leave a couple of fruit for the other guys that are in your neighborhood if you like attracting wildlife in your area. All right, insects. These are the usual guys that we'll suspect for fruit trees. All right. The Sri Lanka weevil isn't very particular, nor is the lubber grasshopper on what type of fruit they like to hang around on. Sri Lanka weevils, I've noticed, love lychee trees. Avocado lacewing, obviously, they prefer avocados. The red bay ambrosia beetle also likes avocados. They are the vector for the laurel wilt disease, which is deadly to avocado trees. And when we were talking about carambola earlier, we were talking about scale, and that's what you see there in number 4. So there's various different types of scale, and each one requires a different type of control measure. Some as easily as just taking your thumbnail and scraping them off. So also in the UF publication, you'll see a section on there on insect pests. This one happens to be on the publication for avocado. And it will tell you that the most likely insect pests that are causing problems to your trees, and you may not have been able to actually see them, but they'll give you a list and a link to each one. So if you suspect that you have avocado lace bugs, they'll provide you a link to that, and it will provide you information on how to control them. So weeds, usually the best thing to do if it's a small tree is hand pulling the weeds, or if you have any kind of insects like Sri Lanka weevils, they sometimes can be easily controlled by taking an umbrella, put it upside down underneath your tree and give it a good shake. Usually what will happen is they'll fall into the umbrella. And then what you want is a bucket of water with soap inside, soapy water, and just drop them in that, and that'll take care of them. The most effective way is allowing nature to take control. Usually if there's an infestation of the pest insects like aphids, usually if you give it a little bit of time, you'll see the good guys come in and take care of it, which means you don't have to put any kind of chemicals whatsoever on the tree itself. And then if it becomes a little bit intolerable to you to have a large amount of infestations from insects, you'll want to use safe chemicals that smother using basically oil or soap or neem. And that takes care of it before you start using some of the more harsher, more toxic chemicals. So also, you'll look at various types of tree varieties. A lot of the new varieties provide resistance to various diseases, okay? If you can find those are the ones you really want to use. So to avoid breeding resistance to various types of pesticides, you want to follow the label. It's the law. More is not better. In fact, it'll be more harmful. Spot treat only in those areas where you're having a problem. You don't have to spray the entire tree. Also, remember, keep a record. If you were having insect problems at a certain time of the year, you'll want to make sure that the next year you look just slightly ahead of that to see whether or not they're coming in, and you can take various measures to take care of that problem. And you want to rotate your chemicals if you're using chemicals so that you have a different mode of action on how it actually kills the insect. So if you have to get to the point where you're using insecticides, you want to use insecticidal oils. Insects have skeletons in which they breathe through their skeletons, okay? The oils actually clog up those pores through the skeletons, and they actually smother the insects, okay? Insecticidal soaps actually cause the exoskeleton or the outside skeleton of the insect to dissolve, okay? That kills the insect. Now, there's various types of bacteria that you can provide, especially for things like caterpillars or young larvae. It's called BT, or I'm gonna sit here and try to remember what it's at. It'll actually say, I'm having a little problem trying to remember which one it is. Bacillus thuringiensis cereana, I believe it's called. And it's normally just, if you ask for BT, it'll show BT on the label as well. You want that for your caterpillars and any larvae that look like caterpillars. And what that does, it actually interferes with their intestinal or digestive problems. It's safe for use by people and various animals and birds alike. So you want to know where in the pest life cycle it's most effective. Always start with the safest solution. A lot of times, things like the hard scale, the only time any kind of insecticide will be effective is when the little guys come out of their mother's hard shell and start going about doing their business. Okay, say your tree's not looking well. It's just not as well as you would expect it. People naturally have a tendency to think, well, maybe it needs more water, or maybe I should put more fertilizer down. Actually, if your tree is having any kind of problem, either nutritional or fungal, those may not be the best solutions. In fact, sometimes it actually causes more trouble than anything else. So in your publication from the University of Florida, you'll see a section on diseases. Okay, this one basically happens to be one for avocados. Avocados have problems with various types of fungal problems. And to control fungal problems, like avocado root rot or powdery mildew, you need to apply a fungicide, a specific fungicide, and you have to apply it before the problem actually shows up. Putting on a fungicide after the problem is already there actually doesn't do anything whatsoever. It keeps it from spreading more than you normally have, but it's not going to cause the problem to disappear. So if you're looking at avocado root rot, okay, which is a possible problem, that's a problem you want to think about if it's been very wet recently. So you've had several days in a row where it's been raining like crazy. And then quite often right after that, you may see some problems on your tree. Then you want to use a fungicide which contains copper, okay? Now the opposite effect, powdery mildew, it actually looks like a powder on the top of a leaf or limb bark. In that case, you want to use a fungicide that has sulfur in it. So basically you need to get the right amount of a recommended fungicide at the same time. Adjuvant, what it says in that little box there, is another type of solution you spray on the tree that makes the fungicide actually stick on the leaves. It basically is like a leaf glue. It keeps it from running off whenever it starts to rain again. So you may have to apply this several times throughout the period of time in which the fungus may appear. And you're going to have to cover both the tops and the bottoms of any kind of leaves. Okay. Nutrient deficiencies. Remember, we were talking about fertilizers, and we were also talking about micronutrient sprays. Usually, when you're talking about nutrient problems, micronutrient sprays are your solution, okay? And knowing which ones, you can look at the leaves themselves. It takes a little bit of practice, but if you go to a website, in which case you may suspect that it's lacking in magnesium or manganese, in which case the leaves start to yellow, but they have several symptoms that look just almost the same. But you'll look at magnesium and it'll say, oh, the veins in the leaves are very pronounced as green. So what you want to do is look up both magnesium and manganese problems for, in this case, say your avocado or your mango. And it'll show you a color picture, and then you're going to say, oh, okay, it's a magnesium problem. So you're going to make sure that your nutritional spray or your granular fertilizer, sometimes granular fertilizers will have a lot of magnesium in it. And that way you won't have to do a nutritional spray. But if it doesn't, then you're going to have to find a nutritional spray that actually has magnesium listed on the label itself. So here's what anthracnose looks like on mango fruit or on the leaves itself, okay? That's when you'll know that you need to apply a fungicide. Now, when you see mango fruit with anthracnose, it's perfectly still safe to eat, okay? It's just a cosmetic problem. The commercial growers, on the other hand, would not be able to sell that fruit in the market. So even though it has a problem and it will not kill the tree, it's still something you can still eat. It will affect the actual fruit on the tree. You may not have as many fruit. So it could actually affect the amount of fruit or early fruit drop. So you'll want to make sure that you apply a regimen of fungicide usually a couple of weeks before you notice problems the year before. Our monthly newsletter, The Garden Bench, is available to you free of charge. It comes in a form on email. It has lots of color in it, color pictures. We do a lot of articles on various types of fruit tree maintenance, all sorts of other types of landscape plants and things like that. We have since now put together a website in which we have an index that gives you information on past issues, a lot concerning backyard fruit tree maintenance, and various types of fruit itself. Basically, what you want to do is do a search for Manatee County Extension Master Gardeners. Click on the Master Gardener Volunteer Program, UF-IFAS, and then scroll down to where it says Resources, and then go to the Master Gardener Bench newsletter. It comes in a Dropbox form, and you can go to the index or go to the current newsletter itself. This will not be available in any of the other extension offices in the state, but you can always come to the Manatee Extension Office and get that as well. So some takeaway tips: use the University of Florida website Fruitscapes for your primary reference. It has everything you need. It's kind of like a dummies for fruit trees. Fertilize your trees often with small amounts rather than infrequently with large amounts of fertilizer. So you want a fertilizer regimen in which you provide fertilizer when the tree needs it throughout its growing period. Don't overwater. Overwatering leaches fertilizer into the water table, especially if you're using phosphorus in our area. Leads to various types of root diseases and tree decline. Always water the ground, not the leaves. Okay, you don't want any kind of water on your leaves that promotes various types of fungal problems. Try not to water late in the day. Usually the best time is early in the morning. Something that a lot of folks have problems with, I tell people, the first year you see fruit on your tree for the first time, pick the fruit off. You want the tree to develop good roots first before you get fruit. So, you know, if you've been waiting 3 to 5 years and now the first fruit comes on the tree, wait another year. It'll make your tree more productive and healthier in the long run. That tree may be providing you fruit for the next 30 years. And if you still have problems and you have questions, please use the Extension Office services throughout wherever you happen to be. In our area, we're at the Extension Office in Palmetto. Here's our information. And with that, I'll take any kind of questions you may have. Kathy, do we have any questions?
John, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I had two buttons to click to unmute myself. So yes, we have a few questions. Our first is from Michelle, who has a question about trees in pots. Are there any that won't do well for long periods of time? She has most of her trees in pots until groundwork is completed and possibly for 2 years before she can get them in the ground.
Yeah, that's fine. In fact, I had a mango tree, a dwarf mango that I kept in a pot for basically 2 years before I put it in the ground because it was 2009, 2010. We had that major winter problem in which we had a freeze in our area. So if I put that little fruit tree out at that time, it probably would have succumbed to the frost. So yeah, you can do that. That's not a problem at all. If it's more than 2 or 3 years, you're probably want to have to check when you actually take the tree out of the pot to make sure that the roots haven't been twirling around in the pot and do some root pruning on there. So that shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, also, here's a mango question. Last year, my mango leaves and fruit had anthracnose. Is it too late to treat for anthracnose now that my tree has flowered?
No, now is the time to do so. So again, check your UF publication, find a fungicide with most likely, because it's now should be coming out. I would say it's we've had quite a wet season. I would use a fungicide that contained copper. Follow the directions for application, and then make sure you get a full spray on both the outer and the underneath the leaves and any buds that might be coming out. If your tree is small, that's easy to do. However, if your mango tree is now 24 feet high, you've now got yourself a big job. So that's why I tell people to keep the tree as small as possible. Also, check on the publication for, it's not once and done. So usually, I'm trying to remember, it's like a 14 day, so maybe every 2 weeks or 10 days, you're going to have to reapply until the actual fruit starts coming out. So that would be my recommendation. Start now. Apply a copper fungicide.
Okay. Blueberry bushes. Are coffee grounds good for blueberry bushes?
Yes. I always tell folks, if you're going to grow blueberries here in the state of Florida, especially in the central part, sometimes in the north, that's not so bad. You won't be able to grow them down south, much further down in containers. And mostly because they have a pH requirement anywhere from 4 to 5.5, which is very acidic. Coffee grounds will provide that. Also, make sure you have at least 2. They require cross-pollination. So if you have a single blueberry bush in a container, it's probably not going to do much for you. They don't like having their roots fooled with. So coffee grounds are okay. I would just check to make sure that you don't overdo it. What you don't want is a lot of moisture on there. So
Okay.
I wouldn't dump like a pound of coffee grounds on a tree. So just small applications are fine.
Next question, is it too late to prune my potted lemon tree?
No. Basically, you can prune anytime after flowering or before flowering. So yeah, you can do it now. If it's flowering, or if you prune off the flowers, you're not going to get the fruit. But yeah, you can do that to maintain any kind of size, or do any kind of maintenance on parts that may be damaged or diseased.
Okay, our next question is from an attendee that has a couple fruit trees in 4-inch pots, and they're about 6 inches tall. How do I know when I should put them in a larger pot? And how much bigger of a pot should I put them in?
Okay, they're about 6 inches. When it gets to be about 10 to 12 inches tall, you might want to repot in a pot next size up. So I'm not sure, was it a 3-inch pot you said that?
4-inch.
Oh, 4-inch. I put it in a 6. And once it gets to be about a 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet, put it in a 1-gallon pot.
All right. Why would a papaya tree fall over? It grew tall, then fell. I saw few roots. Another question, what's the best way to keep a papaya from getting too tall so that he can harvest the fruit? Any way to
Okay.
prune it, or do you have to cut the trunk? Will it grow back?
It will grow back. They're notorious for falling down and or breaking off in high winds. I would go and sorry about that. Got a dog barking in the back. I would go and check on papaya. I know that they have both male, female, and a papaya that has both male and female flowers. So if you have only one, it better be one that has both male and female flowers, or you won't get any fruit. Usually if you have a break in a papaya, if you go down about 2 inches below the break, you can cut it there and it should grow back. If it's totally down, I'd replant.
Okay, thank you. What about avocado tree? Can it be pruned now?
Yes. Again, if it's flowering, which it shouldn't be right about now, but it all depends on the variety. Different avocados bloom at different parts of the year. So you either prune after fruiting or before flowering. Or if it's flowering, again, if you cut off a branch that has flowers on it, you're not going to get that fruit. So Florida is pretty, we're pretty forgiving as far as pruning is concerned. You can basically prune any time of the year. It's just that if you want fruit, you want to make sure that you're not cutting off parts that will actually flower and provide fruit. And then there's some fruit trees that only put out fruit on new growth. So you're going to have to figure out which one's which. And if you basically cut off that new growth, you're not going to get any fruit on that either. So I think you were talking, were you talking avocados again? It shouldn't be a problem.
Avocado. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can do that now. Again, try not to remove more than 25% of the tree at any given time. That doesn't include the broken branches and things like that. If you have a dead branch or broken branch, what you want to do is cut it like 2 inches below wherever the dead part is, unless it's at the actual trunk itself, and then you want to cut it flush to the trunk.
Okay, we're right at about 12 o'clock and we really need to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for their questions. If you have specific questions, you can always email the Master Gardeners here in Manatee County at manateemg@gmail.com. And I have put that in the chat. You can see that. There's also, as John mentioned, the Fruitscapes website and the University of Florida Solutions for Your Life website has lots of gardening info there. I want to thank everybody for coming, and we hope to see you next week for our selections of different varieties for of fruit trees for Central Florida. So thank you very much, and thank you, John.
Thank you very much, everybody.